Hi, MCC1789. Here's my latest response in our series here. Now, it wasn't clear in your last video regarding the wage laborer. Something that you said on the video, I just didn't hear it. I listened to it several times. Who would prefer something else? It's at about 1 minute and 38 seconds into your video. I'm going to interrupt myself here and add a couple of points. In describing capitalism, you talk about, quote, the goal being the greatest accumulation possible for a few, end quote. Now, I just want to point something out, and that is that goals don't float around in the air. We don't find them laying around on the ground. They don't grow on trees. Goals don't exist outside the mind of a conscious being that can pursue them. Well, of course, we can have common goals, but there's no such thing as the goal that exists independently. We can talk about my goals, or your goals, or somebody else's goals, or our common goals, or maybe opposing goals, but the goal doesn't really mean anything. You also mentioned that hierarchy means involuntary, arbitrary, coercive authority. Okay, well, involuntary, arbitrary, coercive authority is definitely something I oppose. But I just want to make sure I understand. To most people, the word hierarchy means something like this, where some relation between different things can be drawn in a tree structure. Here's an example hierarchy for an encyclopedia that I found on Wikipedia. Of course, real-world hierarchies are usually much more complex than that. For example, here's a hierarchy for the Department of Computing at the Imperial College of London. Or how about this? A partial diagram of the animal kingdom. This one is actually drawn like a tree. Isn't that cute? Ooh, look. Here's a hierarchy I found on the website of the Industrial Workers of the World. Isn't that interesting? So anyway, I just want to make sure I understand. You're not opposed to hierarchies in this sense. You're only opposed to involuntary, arbitrary, coercive authority, right? Now, let me back up and ask another question about the milling machine. Now, remember, I proposed that I obtained the milling machine in some manner that you consider to be legitimate. Maybe I saved up some of my income and bought a milling machine instead of a bicycle or stereo or whatever. Let me just point out also that my example is in the context of an anarchist socialist system. So, maybe I work in a democratically run factory or something. Now, I would like to be clear on where you stand on theft. We sort of addressed this because you said I have the right to protect my family and my personal property or possessions. But suppose somebody picks the lock on my front door, sneaks into my house, and takes my milling machine without my consent. Now, is that acceptable? Is that something that you consider to be completely okay, or is it not okay for someone to do that? And if it's not okay, how would that situation be dealt with? Now, I would like to point out an inconsistency in the things you have said. On the one hand, you said that the establishment of police, military, and courts is establishment of a state. You also said, quote, now I am not against police, courts, and military if necessary, end quote. Yet you also say that you're an anarchist, which, at the very least, all anarchists agree, requires that you reject the legitimacy of the state. Now, these three statements, which I've labeled A, B, and C, are not logically consistent and cannot be made to be logically consistent without doing things like secretly redefining words in the middle of the conversation or something equally silly. Now, you could say, well, I'm not really an anarchist, thus eliminating statement C, but I'm pretty darn sure that's not what you would do. Okay, well, you could eliminate statement B and say, well, establishment of police, military, and courts is establishment of a state, and that's why I oppose them, because I'm an anarchist. Okay, or you could say, I oppose the state because I'm an anarchist, but I'm not against police, courts, and the military if needed. I just oppose the establishment of a state to perform these functions. Well, based on some things you've said, I think I know which way you would go, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll just ask you, which of the three statements would you eliminate?